Greetings. In this video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. Alright, so far in this course we have covered quite a bit of HTML, which is the layout of your pages. In other words, like your paragraphs, your headings, your tables, your links, all that stuff that we need to present the web page, right? All the nuts and bolts. What CSS does for us is it allows us to format our web pages to look nice. So in other words, let's say I'm on a page that has gray background and white text and has drop down menus and all kinds of cool features. Well, that's the stuff that we use CSS to create. Now in this course, because we're just covering the basics, we're not going to get too involved or too fancy in the in CSS, but we do need to know some of the basics. So let's go ahead and cover some of the real basic stuff here. There are three different ways that you can use CSS in your pages. You can do it inline, which is using the style attribute, which I'll cover here in a second. You can do internally, using the style element in the head section of your HTML document. I'll cover that in a second here as well. And then finally, and most preferably, you can do external style sheets or external CSS files. The reason why I prefer the external files is because you can use the same rules for all of the web pages on your site, which is great. That way you don't have to keep typing in the same code over and over again. The other thing that happens is it reduces your chances of mistakes, which is great. So you don't have to duplicate efforts, and if you screw something up, it's easier to fix. So CSS styling has the following syntax. We have our element, and then inside that element we have our property, our value, and then any other properties and values. So the element is an HTML element name, and the property is the CSS property. And then finally that value is the CSS value. And if you have multiple styles, you just separate those with a semicolon. So let's show you exactly how this works. And I'll start with an inline style. So inline style is useful for applying a unique style to a single HTML element. Okay, that means that I just have this one little thing in my page that I need to change. What I've done here is I have opened up the HTML template and I've saved it off to a file called CSS. So I'm just going to type in something, title here for CSS sample, for example. And let's say I want to do an H1 size heading, and I want to say this is a blue heading. Okay, I'm going to save my file. I'm going to go and launch it. Open it here. File, open file. And what we'll see is that we have an H1 size heading. Right now, even though the text says that it's a blue heading, it's not blue because I don't have any styling in here. I don't have any style rules. I need to go create one. So I'm going to go back to my web page. And here's how it works. If this is an inline style, we just say inside of the element that we're using, we type in style, equal sign, open quote, the style rule. So in other words, color. And the color I'm going to assign to this is blue, close quote. If you have multiple rules, then you would just do a semicolon and then your next rule. Okay. Save my file, refresh my page, and you'll see that that heading is indeed blue. That's how I do inline styling. Okay. The next kind of style that we can do is what's called internal styling. And an internal style sheet is used to define a common style for all of the HTML elements on a page. So, for example, let's say I want to have a document that has a light gray background, H1 size headings are blue, and my paragraphs are green. This is how you would do this. It's up in the head section of your document. Okay. And, it can be Um, Pretty much anywhere in the head section, but I would put it after the title. It should be one of the bottom things in your head section, is what I would do. We'll open up a new style tag. Do a closing style tag, give yourself a couple of lines in between. And now, what we're going to say is this. I have my element that I want to modify. And then you want to do an open bracket, or I'm sorry, an open curly. And then type in your rule. So in this case, background color. I want to set my background color to light gray. H1 size heading to, or H1 size heading color to blue. My paragraphs, I want them to be green. Okay. Make sure you have your closing style tag. And if you want, you can even indent this with tabs. It doesn't really matter. It just makes it easier to read. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this old rule out of here, out of the inline style. And what you'll see is that I have blue heading, light gray background, and I'm going to go type in a paragraph real quick. And I'm just going to say this is a paragraph, just so you know what that is. Okay, so again, light gray background, blue heading, green paragraph. Okay, pretty easy. The third and most common style, and the one that I would recommend that you use most of the time, or probably all the time in this basic course, is an external style sheet. Okay? So external style sheets are ideal when the style is applied to many pages. So with external style sheets, you change the look of an entire website by changing just one file. And that's what I really love about this. I make one change and it affects all of the sites on, or all the pages on my site. If I did an internal style sheet, I have to go and redo this code on every page. And any time that I make a change to any of these rules, I have to go and recreate these rules on each page on my site that's affected by it. So it's a real pain in the butt versus an external style sheet. I just do it once. Here's how you do an external style sheet. Again, up in the head section, all you need to do is just basically create a link here. Okay? So in your head section, you just type in link. It's a new tag. REL for relationship, =, open quote, style sheet, close quote, space, and then href, =, open quote, whatever the name of your file is. By default, it's usually in the same folder or directory as your page is, and it's usually called styles.css. Now, that could change. It really doesn't matter what the name of that file is or where it's located as long as you can get to it. But for this class, I'd like you to, go ahead and just follow along with me and do what I do. All right, now let's do this. The next thing I need to do is I need to go and create a new file. And I need to save it as styles.css. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do the same rule that I did earlier. Let me grab my sheet here. And I'm going to do background color of light gray, H1 blue, and P green. Okay. So all I need to do is just type in my rules again. Okay. My body, background color is light gray. H1 size headings are blue. Paragraphs are green. Right. If I go and refresh my page, it should look the same. Right? Because the rules are the same, they're just in one sheet. Now, let's say that I have my CSS sample here, right? My page. I'm going to copy my code. I'm going to create a new web page. And I'm going to call this one CSS sample 2. And I'm just going to type out, let's see. I'm just changing the paragraph and the heading slightly. That way I can tell them apart. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open a new tab and open a file for CSS2. Okay. So here's the thing, is I have two different web pages open and see how they're using that exact same CSS file. So the rules are the same. So if I want to go change my color of my paragraph from green to yellow, for example, like just change that one file for my CSS file, and that change is shown in both of these HTML files. So instead of using inline styles or internal style sheets where I have to go change both of these web pages I've been working on, I no longer have to do that. That's why I want you to use an external style sheet. It's so cool. All right. Moving on. Let's look a little bit at fonts here. Okay, so when we're dealing with fonts, we have a few different things we can change. We can change our color, and that defines our text color to be used. So in other words, if I want blue text, yellow text, red text, purple text, whatever. Our font family, that defines our fonts that we're going to be using. So for example, like Verdana or Courier. And then finally, our font size property, that defines the text size that we want to use. Now, your text size could be anything from pixels to percentages. In this class, we're probably going to just look at percentages relative to the system default. So in other words, if I want some text that is a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger than what we would normally see, we can set that here. Okay, let's play around with some fonts. Now that I have my style sheet here, this is great. I can just change a couple of things. So let's say in my H1 size headings, I want my color to be blue, and I want my font family to be Verdana, and I want my size to be 300%. Okay. Now, well, let's go ahead and take a look. What you're going to see is this heading should be huge and different font. And that's what we see. Let's go change our paragraph real quick too. Let's change our paragraph color to red. Our font family to be Courier. And our size to be 160%. What you'll see is that our paragraph is much bigger and is red. Okay. So that's how you change the fonts. It's pretty simple. What I would do is just play around with it and see what you like. And you'll do that as part of your project and part of your assignment, so it'll be pretty straightforward. All right, then moving on here. The next thing we have is the box model. So every HTML element has a box around it, even if you can't see it. Okay? So for example, our paragraph that we have right here has a little box around it. So does the heading. Right now you can't see the box because it's transparent. There's no border around it. So one of the ways that we can actually see the border is by using the border property. And what this does is it defines a visible border around that element. So let's say, for example, I want to see borders in my paragraph. All I type in is border. How big I want it to be? Let's just say 1 pixel. Do I want a solid border? Do I want a dash border? There are all kinds of different ones. You can look it up if you'd like. But in this case, I'm going to do a solid border around here. And the color I'm going to choose is black. Here's what you'll see. You'll see that now around this paragraph, I have a border. It's black, it's solid, and it's 1 pixel in size. So very small. Okay, another thing we can do is, right now, if we look at this border, it's really close to my text. One of the things that I can do is I can set padding around this element, this paragraph, and it's between the paragraph and its border. So let's say I want padding set up. I'm going to do 5 pixels or 10 pixels all the way around. I'm just going to say padding, 10 pixels. Here's what I'll see. From the top, from the bottom, from the left, and from the right, I have 10 pixels of space between the paragraph and the border. Now, one of the things you can do with padding, let's say I just want padding on the top and bottom. Okay. Or I'm sorry, the top and the top and the bottom. Let's do that. So it's top, right, bottom, left. It goes clockwise. Here's what we'll see. I have nothing on the left, nothing on the right. Top is 10, bottom is 10. Let's show you in a little more detail with more padding. You'll see that on the left and on the right, if I had a paragraph that went all the way here. There we go. See how there's 50 pixels here, 50 pixels here, and 10 and 10. Let's move this back. Okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this back to 10 pixels for now, all the way around, just to kind of give you an example. Now let's say we have a border around the heading here as well. Let's go ahead and set that up. Okay, now here's what I have. I have a heading and a paragraph, and they both have some padding, and I don't like that there's really not a whole lot of space, or maybe there's too much space here between these two elements. What I can do is I can set what's called a margin, and what that does is it's kind of like padding, but it's between elements. Okay? What it does is it defines a margin or a space outside the border. Now let's say, for example, I want 30 pixels outside this border for my paragraph of space, extra space. What it's going to do is it's going to say that I have 30 pixels from above me, below me, to the left of me, and to the right of me. If I don't want any margin at all, I just type in no pixels, and it's going to shove everything back to basically to the defaults. Okay. Now let's go and do the same thing for H1 and see what happens. Here's what you'll see. I've removed my default margin, and you'll see that there's no margin here anymore, so my borders are butted up right against each other. If I want to change that and I say, okay, well, I just want to go 10 pixels, you'll see that it comes in slightly from all the way around. Okay. And I can do that for my paragraph as well. Just cleans it up a little bit, makes it look nice. So that's border. You'll just play around with it a little bit and, you know, see how it works for you. All right, the ID attribute. So all of the examples that I've shown you above, they're just kind of, if I have a rule in here, for example, it's for H1, it's for all of the H1 size headings in the entire document, basically, in the entire page. I can use my ID attribute to specify exactly which element I want to change in that part of the page. So for example, let's say I have in my CSS page here, I have a heading, a paragraph, and let's say another heading and another paragraph. Okay. Here's what I can do is this. I'm going to set up a second paragraph, okay? And I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this is a special paragraph. I'm going to give it an ID. So it's ID equals and then whatever ID I have here. I'm going to call it special. Okay? Because it's a little different. It's special than the other ones around it. In my styles.css file, here's what I'm going to put. I'm going to say paragraph, and it's P, pound sign, special, and try to remember what I saved that as here. All right, so P special, and I'm going to say this. Instead of red, I'm going to say that that one should be green for my text. Everything else is the same. I'm going to go and save that page, reload my file, and you'll see that my special paragraph now is green. Okay, here is something that you need to understand too, that I don't know if they talk about in your tutorials on W3 Schools, but it's called precedence. And basically anything that starts at the top in your in the top of your style sheet here, if we have a default setting up here, for example, anything H1 is blue colored, okay? If I change any rules for H1, even though I have them set up here, if I, let's say, for example, I type in down here, H1 color is purple. Okay, here's what we're going to see, is that because even though I have something up here in blue, if I have it on later on down in my list of rules, it's going to take precedence. It's going to say, okay, well, you have it set up here, but I see the rule again repeated down here. Oh, this must be newer and more relevant. I'm going to go ahead and use this setting, okay, this rule. So you have to be careful with that. All right, so anyways, that's an ID attribute. Class is very similar. That's another attribute that we use. And basically with class, the difference that you would use semantically is ID is something for something very specific. For example, I have a very special paragraph that should have green color. It's not something I use frequently, okay? But let's say we have a perfect example would be an error class. Okay? Whenever you have an error message, you would say, okay, well, if I'm going to print out an error message, I would say that I'm going to print out this message, I'm going to give it the class of error, and error might have red text, for example. Okay? So here's how you would do it. I'm going to go ahead and go back into my CSS page here, and I'm going to create another paragraph, and it's just going to say something like this. This is an error message. Okay? I'm going to say P class equals error. That tells me that this is the error class and that its text should be red. Okay? I'm going to go back into my style sheet. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up a class, and I'm going to call it error. Okay, now the difference between a class and ID in CSS is that your IDs have a £, your classes have a period. Okay? So paragraph for an error, its color is red. Save my file, and what you'll see is that my error message is indeed in red. Okay? You could even do something kind of funny and say that my font size should be 900%. No, I'm just making this up. What I'm trying to do here is to make this error class stand out big time. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and delete that rule, but that just kind of shows you that that it is indeed in its own class and not with what we have going on up here in the defaults for paragraphs. Okay? All right, so that is an ID, or I'm sorry, a class. So here is your quick summary. One, you want to use the HTML style attribute for inline styling. Okay, that's when you only need to make a tiny change on one page for your entire site. I do not recommend that you do inline styles very often at all, but if you do need to, that's why you would use it. You can use the style element in the head section to define internal CSS. Again, don't do this as a general thing. You have the ability to, but you should really be using an external CSS file. And how you do that is you type in a link in your head section. Okay? Use your CSS color property to define your text colors, your font family property for your fonts, your font size property for your text sizes, your border property for your visible element borders, your padding property for your space inside the border, and your margin for your space outside the border. So that, in a nutshell, are the very, very, very basics of CSS. We're going to get into this stuff in far greater detail in later weeks in the course, but for right now, those are the basic things that'll help get you started. As always, if you have any questions, just let me know, and I will help you out. Thanks.